Alright, so I know that making this video is going to sort of make my channel start to become an Ask Yourself response channel, which I'm really not that interested in doing, but there's always interesting content coming from him that makes me want to comment on things. So I wanted to respond to two things quickly. First, today was the Stephen Molyneux versus Ask Yourself discussion. And if you watch that, I'm not going to go through the whole thing and break this point by point. It's really long, and I don't think that'd be very useful. But if you did watch it, you'll probably notice that almost the entire discussion hinged on just setting up a hypothetical. And there was a lot of back and forth about it. So I thought I'll just give context to hypotheticals in general. So Stephen Molyneux had the three trait stack or something, certain things that Ask Yourself was trying to make a hypothetical to bypass, and then to test out Stephen Molyneux's reaction to that. And I've said before that I have no problem with this. I think this is a useful self-reflection tool. I've never been happy about the way Ask Yourself goes about it, but that doesn't mean that the idea is bad to begin with. So here on my notepad here, we got hypotheticals. So one of the main understandings of when you make a hypothetical world, you tend to think of everything else as equal. So everything about this world is also in that world. And sometimes that's a good thing, you know, because it lets you not have to smooth out so many different details. But this can also cause problems, and I think this came up a lot when they were having the discussion, because for Molyneux, it was clear that he was trying to keep a lot of things were equal, which is why he started talking about a lot of the different contexts. Now, I do think a lot of the times he was, especially towards the end, he was sort of just trying to dodge and make it more difficult, but I'm going to get that into that when we talk about intentions. So the point is that if you say, well, in this hypothetical, 51% of people have this sort of cognitive complexity, um, you don't have to talk about the physics of the world. You consider those to be equal. You don't have to talk about the way a society is set up. We'll consider that to be the same, or any of those sorts of things. And that usually is the normal understanding. But sometimes that can change the context and not get to the question that you're really trying to get to. So we're going to talk about entailed changes. So what this means is when I change one thing about a world, something else necessarily needs to change in order to make that work. So here's an example. Imagine a world where people ate other people, right? Where this is acceptable. So we're not only just saying that people do this, it would be entailed that their values also match that, right? Otherwise, we're going to say, well, that's just how they're behaving, even though their values don't line up to it, right? So that might be a sort of entailed change that we would expect. We would expect that the laws have changed, right? That would be another aspect that's been changed. So there might be a bunch of different changes that come with the change that you suggest. And we tend to try and make it the most simplistic, right? The easiest, the path of least resistance in order to make those sorts of changes. Um, Rather than saying that, there is a mad scientist who is robotically controlling everybody and forcing them to eat other people. I mean, that would fit this statement, right? That would be a world where people ate other people. But again, we're trying to get as close to all else equal as we can, right? And adding this mad scientist gets us farther away from all else equal. But still, some things do need to change, other than just this statement, other entailed changes. So we're going to try and find the easiest way. So we'll say, well, that's what people's values now are, or something like that. And the law is just removed. So they're not still in a world where this is illegal and they're all being jailed for it, right? where we're going to just grant another entailed change that goes along with this change. And we're going to do it as closely to this as we can. And that's the process of setting up hypotheticals that work really well. So the second point I wanted to talk about is intentions, and this is where I felt Molyneux was really failing, because Ask Yourself's intentions were pretty clear. Is that he wanted to take the traits that he put out, and that Stephen Molyneux put out, and create a hypothetical where basically just those are removed and as close to all else equal as we can get, right? So a lot of that is when he's asking questions like, well, how can we know that they won't be able to reproduce in any way, shape, or form? So he's looking for extra context, and a lot of that extra context can just be exploited, or to try to find holes with it, or why it would be unbelievable or irrational to think that's the case, right? And it tends to be the case that the person making the hypothetical needs to think of another new context that's as close to all else equal as possible in order to continue on with the hypothetical. But sometimes it's nice to just grant the change. It's like, I don't really know how, but let's just assume that there is a way. Later on, they came to the point where, you know, the humans weren't suffering because of the state they found themselves in, right? So that would be an entailed change, right? Ask Yourself wants to say, well, everybody's become, you know, mentally deficient in some respect, or let's just say their cognition is moved towards a cow. That's sort of the wording that they were getting to. And Molyneux's point was that, well, if all things were equal, right, if that was in the real world, well, then they would have a hell of a time surviving, right? Which is true, right? So there needs to be more changes made to fit Ask Yourself's intentions. But Molyneux was, I would say, purposely trying to not grant Ask Yourself's intentions. The reason why Ask Yourself said a wizard is because that's just like, let's just use magic, because that's one of the easiest ways. He said, you know, a wizard or technology. Now, obviously, technology would have been the more realistic answer, but Ask Yourself was more just trying to wave it away, because if he had to explain the technology, then that would take even longer for him to get to his point. And I think Ask Yourself was trying to avoid that, which is why he was just invoking magic, which Stephen Molyneux just basically ridiculed him for making it more and more obtuse, more unrealistic. So I feel like the intentions of the person giving the hypothetical should be appreciated, and that you should try to grant whatever entailed changes are simplistic enough to get the point across. But the last point is, and I feel like Stephen Molyneux's points were, is it Stephen or Stefan? I don't know. I don't really watch his content, but whatever. Is a good hypothetical will end up with self-reflection. Now, this is something I'm not going to expect to Ask Yourself to admit, because I think he uses a lot of hypotheticals for ridicule, right? He wants to put you in a weird sounding situation and then make you look weird, right? That's essentially his ultimate goal. He's explicitly stated this in the past. I don't know if his position's changed on that, but yeah, that is definitely the way he behaves with most people. And he doesn't tend to use this as a tool for self-reflection. Now, I don't think he's against self-reflection. He seems to be okay with people who say, well, I have to think about it and come back. But I think this is Ask Yourself's main tool. And a lot of people know that, and so they're going to resist engaging with him very sincerely. And I think that's just one of his problems. But a good hypothetical should lead to self-reflection, which means it can't be so far out of the realm of possibilities that if you answered it, you really don't know if your answer is true, right? If you change so many properties about the universe and then you ask, how would you behave in this scenario? If you change enough things, the answer is just going to move towards, I don't know. This is just too weird and I have absolutely no idea how I would actually act in this situation. Like, am I allowed to destroy universe boxes? I don't know. What would I destroy a universe box full of cows to save my life? This is the sort of question that I find hard to answer because just nothing within my experience tends to inform me on the sort of decision making I would have to do, right? So I find certain hypotheticals go a little beyond the realm of self-reflection, and so that there is a little legitimate criticism of saying you're changing too much. You're just asking too much of my abstraction to be able to tell you realistically what I would do in that sort of situation. And that can often move to the ridicule, you know, oh, how could you not have an answer for that? My system is so simplistic that it does, you know, say for that. Well, I mean, if my system is a little more contextually based, right, or these push me into particular gray areas, then you should be able to accept that. Because you can push that onto the vegan position, right? Like how many chickens are you allowed to murder before you can save your life? And then demand an exact number, right? When you push someone else into a gray area, you know that they're not going to be able to answer it straight up. And a lot of people do get pushed into these gray areas. But that's just some things I wanted to say about hypotheticals. In my opinion, I thought Ask Yourself was doing a fairly good job, you know, trying to make his point. And I think Stephen Molyneux was the one dodging, which is really funny coming from me, because this is almost always my reverse opinion whenever I'm actually watching Ask Yourself talk to someone. I almost always think he's being the jackass. But a lot of that was because Ask Yourself wants to be polite to someone who has a large following, mostly because, you know, he wants a large following. So he knows that, you know, bitching this person out is just going to make him look bad. If Stephen Molyneux was anyone else, if that was just some random who came into his server, he would have been screaming his head off at that guy about what an idiot he thought he was and blah blah blah, and doing the regular Ask Yourself stuff. So, I mean, I guess I find that kind of shitty of the way Ask Yourself goes about these sorts of discussions. He's not really looking for any sort of understanding or truth. He doesn't really care what other people's positions are, in so much as he can, you know, either grow his fan base or ridicule other positions. I just think that's what he feels morality is. I think he thinks that's the depth of it. And even though I take up certain subjective notions, I still think there's a large conversation to be had about what morality is, you know, getting to the meta-ethics and the normative ethics, because I don't think people are perfect at describing themselves. And so I think this still opens up a large amount of discussion. Um, Moving on to that, there was this other video that he put out where this person was resisting the definition of the Holocaust when applied to the animal agriculture industry. And I just wanted to touch on that because, you know, Ask Yourself's response was to say that while there is actually a legitimate definition of Holocaust, right? One of my problems with this is that, sure, you can find a definition in a dictionary, but how people use a word tends to be more important than what's in a dictionary. So the way people understand the word Holocaust has been taken over by the noun rather than the verb of to destroy or slaughter on a mass scale, which is the one that Ask Yourself moves towards. And I guess the problem I have with him trying to bring it back to this other definition that a lot of people have, and he's trying to ridicule them for using, you know, ignoring a dictionary definition. which I think is generally reasonable. Words evolve. That's just what happens. And he's obviously not taking any note of this whatsoever when he appeals to a dictionary definition. But what's really annoying is that if he uses the definition of a Holocaust, then we can say vegans support the animal Holocaust when pesticides are sprayed and killing animals, right? Now you could say, well, it's less suffering, right? Well, sure, sure. Like, let's say we do the calculations and we find out that actually it is less suffering. It's still a Holocaust under the definition, right? So you support the animal Holocaust. Or we could say a animal Holocaust, you know, rather than saying that there's one definite one. We'll just say that you at least support a animal Holocaust. Or we could get even more stupid about it and say, well, since it's destruction on a mass scale, we're in the carrot Holocaust. We continuously destroy carrots. We continuously destroy all sorts of things. They're all holocausts. But you can tell, even though it would technically match the definition in the dictionary, that it seems to be too broad. This is too broad of a definition. There's things within the referent that we don't want to be in there, right? The usage of Holocaust would never normally be applied to carrots. But there it is in the dictionary, a way that we could apply it. So, I mean, if he's going to allow for no contextual understanding whatsoever, and we can go as literal as we want, then he's going to have to accept all these stupid usages of the word. And if he is going to allow contextual understandings, or, you know, the way societies use words, then I think he'll find that the way he uses Holocaust would be quickly moved out, right? It's obviously narrowed to a point through usage that the animal agriculture industry would not be used by most people. Now, don't get me wrong, I actually don't have a problem with vegans trying to make that part of the lexicon, because they're trying to make a point, right? They're trying to say these things are both terrible. You know, a lot of them feel like it's even worse than the Jewish Holocaust, which is fair enough. So I don't mind them making the push for a language change. This is just the way societies progress, and I'm not against that. My only point is that he's going to be strict to the definitions. He's going to end up with problems of his own. And I just thought it was kind of funny after that point that this little clip happened. So I just want to play this for you.
I'm asking a different question.
I thought he was comparing a dog to like a cow or something. And also a human is an animal. So finally he gives some basis for the disanalogy, why you can't compare dogs, in this case, to humans. And it's that a dog is an animal. A human is also an animal.
Yep. So if we go dictionary here. Oh, yeah, well, that seems to be supporting what he's saying, but, oh, what is this? An animal as opposed to a human being. Well, it looks like there was a legitimate usage for the non-vegan in the video. I guess, ask yourselves, a dictionary denier. Well, sucks to be him, I guess. Anyways, thanks for watching the video. I'll see you guys later.